You know, when we talk about a country's success, our first question is usually, how rich is it? But honestly, that's only a tiny part of the story. A nation's real progress is also about quality of life and the wildly different paths countries take to build that life for their people. So let's unpack what economic development really looks like.
To kick things off, just look at these two economic powerhouses. On one side, you've got China. They built their entire modern economy by becoming the world's factory, literally changing the game for manufacturing everywhere. And on the other side, you have India, which is doing the exact same thing, but for services, becoming the world's back office.
So that's the big question, right? How did these two massive countries, neighbors, rivals, end up on such completely different paths? One builds factories, the other builds call centers and software hubs. The answer tells us so much about what actually drives a nation's economic journey.
In this image right here, this gets to the very heart of India's strategy. This is a campus for Infosys, a tech giant that, believe it or not, was founded back in 1981 with just $250. India's growth has been organic, a real bottom-up story built on brain power. China, on the other hand, took a top-down approach. They threw their doors open to massive foreign investment to build out their manufacturing machine. We're talking two completely different playbooks.
And if you dig a little deeper, you see these playbooks are rooted in their core foundations. India is a democracy with a pretty transparent legal system, and that really helped private, homegrown companies to flourish. China? Well, it's not a democracy, and it leveraged its huge supply of inexpensive labor through a state-directed, investment-heavy model. It's literally brain power versus factory power, organic growth versus a grand master plan.
That whole story is a brilliant example of how there's more than one way for a country to grow. But it also brings up another huge question. How do we actually keep score? How do we measure and compare these different journeys to figure out what's really working?
Well, the most common tool we use is gross domestic product, or GDP. The easiest way to think about it is as a country's total annual income. It's the value of every single thing produced inside its borders over 1 year. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's the number you hear about all the time. But, and this is a big but, it's also deeply flawed.
And here's why. GDP has these massive blind spots. Think about it. It doesn't count volunteer work, or taking care of your family, or that entire shadow economy of cash deals. It's also just a snapshot in time, so it doesn't tell you if things are getting better or worse. And its averages can hide gigantic inequalities. Just look at China, where the coastal cities look like the future, while the interior is far, far behind.
So how do we get a better picture? Well, the first step is an adjustment called Purchasing Power Parity, or PPP. Instead of just converting currencies, PPP asks a much smarter question. What can the money actually buy? It compares the cost of a standard basket of goods, stuff like rice, soap, apples, to give us a much more realistic idea of the true cost of living.
But even with PPP, we're still pretty much just talking about money. A much more complete picture comes from something called the Human Development Index, or HDI. This is more like a country's annual physical exam. It looks beyond the bank account to measure the actual well-being of its citizens, looking at things like health, education, and standard of living. It asks the most important question: is a country using its wealth to create genuinely better lives for its people?
Now this is where the story gets really interesting. Check out Germany. It ranks 17th in terms of pure income per person, but it jumps all the way up to 4th on the Human Development Index. That's a huge positive gap. It shows Germany is incredibly good at turning its money into well-being. Now look at South Africa. It's 89th in income, but it drops to 119th in human development. It's just a powerful, powerful reminder that having a high national income doesn't automatically mean progress for everyone.
So with these better tools in our hands, we can start to categorize countries and actually map out their progress. The world isn't just rich or poor. It's more like a ladder with nations on every single rung, and everyone's trying to climb.
Generally speaking, economists sort countries into 3 main buckets. At the bottom, you have developing nations, often with poor infrastructure and low incomes. In the middle, you have the newly industrialized countries, or NICs, think China and India, which are just exploding with industrial output. And at the top are the developed countries, which are highly industrialized and where people enjoy a really high quality of life.
Okay, now take a look at this. This slide tells a really powerful story without using a single word. On the left, that's a map of national wealth. The green areas are the richest. On the right, that's a map of political risk. The red and orange spots are the riskiest. See a pattern? Wealth and stability seem to go hand in hand. And that brings us to one of the biggest roadblocks on that whole development journey.
Because you see, climbing that economic ladder isn't just about having good ideas or working hard. Nations also have to navigate this absolute gauntlet of political risks that can stop progress dead in its tracks.
So, what is political risk? Simply put, it's the chance that something political, like a conflict, violence, or even just a sudden change in the rules, is going to hurt business and the economy. It's a massive factor for any company looking to invest overseas, and it's a huge hurdle for developing countries trying to attract that investment in the first place.
One of the most extreme political risks out there is property seizure, and the absolute most severe form is something called confiscation. This is when a government just walks in and takes a company's assets, factories, equipment, the whole shebang, with zero compensation. Poof, the owners are left with absolutely nothing.
Okay, a slightly less harsh but still devastating version is called expropriation. Here, the government seizes the assets, but it does give you some form of payment. The catch? The compensation is usually way, way below what the assets are actually worth, and there's no legal way for you to appeal the decision.
And then there's the big one, nationalization. This is when the government doesn't just take one company, it takes over an entire industry, like oil or telecommunications. Now, this might save some jobs in the short term or help with a political goal, but the long-term effect is almost always the same. It scares away future foreign investment, slowing down economic development for years, maybe even decades.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground here. The different paths of India and China, the tools we use to measure success, and all the political risks that can just completely derail everything. So let's bring it all home. What's the big takeaway?
It's this. Understanding economic development means you have to see the whole, messy, complicated picture. It means you have to get past a simple rich versus poor mindset. You have to appreciate the different strategies countries use, understand the scorecards that measure both wealth and well-being, and recognize the very real obstacles that can knock a country right off that ladder.
Which leaves us with this one final thought to chew on. As the journeys of India and China prove, there is no single one-size-fits-all answer. So, in our complex, interconnected, and constantly changing world, the question remains, what really is the best path to prosperity for everyone?